All right, so today we're doing a little bit of kind of study group type of class. So I won't be introducing anything new. And I want to start by saying the class is designed for you to be able to learn the different tools and materials, and the exercises go with those materials, right? If you understand what a list is, there'll be an exercise that applies that list, and then we'll build on those. And I'm saying that because we might have the urge, and this has happened with other students, and it's not, I'm not, if it's you listening, I'm not dissing you. I mean, it's logical. I've done it myself. We want to get to the result, and we might, well, I'm going to Google it, right? Try to limit yourself to what I'm teaching you and to build the answers I expect from you. So that way, in the future, when you go to Google something and go to Stack Overflow, you know what you're pulling from those places. You understand the code that you're going to use. The last thing you want to do is take code from somebody else, put it in, and keep hammering at it until you get a result, and you don't understand how you got to that result because you don't understand the code. You don't understand what this list is for and what it's doing, for example, right? So all the exercises build on things that we discussed in class, okay? So trust the process in that sense, and it'll continue to get more complicated. So don't worry about it. We'll get there. All right. So, Brooke, you want to talk about? You mentioned you want to talk about the parser functions.
Yeah, I just wanted. Sorry, I'm just looking at my other computer. I'm not trying to face away from everyone. I just sort of wanted to sort of an overview of parser functions.py. I guess sort of something that I sort of need to improve is the sort of the structure and organization of the scripts I'm trying to run. So I think I mean, these are like really, really basic stuff, but even stuff like indentation, I think one, like you were saying just before class, is Python so sensitive and it just can throw off the rest of the script. So I guess it's sort of like that kind of logic I think I need to improve. Is that okay? Is that too basic?
No, it's not. There's an important teaching point. So let's start there. I'm giving you tools, right? Like I'm giving you hammers and nails and even pieces of wood for you to build a house, okay? That doesn't know that you'll know how to build a house from the get-go, even if you know how to identify a piece of wood from a hammer, right? So that's okay. So after I give you the tools and the materials to build the house, now I'm gonna give you a plan of how to do it. So I'm showing you some coding patterns, okay? And and this is for everybody, look at the class and look at code as a coding pattern. For example, if you scripts, when you would do a Python script, you want to put your imports at the beginning. You don't have to. You can put them anywhere you want. But the best way of putting a roof on a house is on top of it, right? So your imports going to be on the top, and I'll keep mentioning more things as you're going down through your code and how you write it. Remember that Python, at least as of today, it reads your code from top down, left to right. Right? And that's how it understands it. So to take that into account, put your imports and then start doing your code. Python is super sensitive on indentation, right? I'm using the code, my editor that I like. If you notice here, when I highlight it, and hopefully that's viewable, and Brooke, if it's too little, let me know, I'll up the font.
I can see it, but I have a larger desktop.
Okay, well, maybe I want to, let's make that a little bit, I'll figure it out text. Yeah.
Can people see that? Put a 1 if you can see that, or put a 0 if you need it to be larger.
Yeah, let me know, please. I think it's command.
We have a 0, so I think it depends on people's monitor size.
Okay, well, I found it. All right. So notice here how my editor, at least when I highlight, it gives me dots here. That means those dots are spaces. So I'm indenting everything with spaces. Even if I go here, right, and I hit a tab, that tab is still spaces, okay? So you want to, and I mentioned this in class previously, because if I mix tab with spaces, the code is not going to work, and you're going to have a hard time figuring out what the problem is. So you got to be really careful with that. The second thing is Python. If you put something like like this, for example, we discussed that a function, when you declare it this way, the next line for this to be able to be executed has to be at one level of indentation, right?
Yeah.
If it's not, and you try to run it, it will give you an indentation error. And it will tell you, okay, on line 6, because it expects this to be indented and it's not. And the same thing when you do a for, like for X, and this is just, I'm making it up, in Y, right? And then, you know, I write some stuff here.
Yeah.
It's going to give the same error, right? So that makes sense. So keep that in mind. Indentation is important. I taught, and you know, for the folks that were in here, watch the last video. There's a black, it's a suite or a module you can use that will help you with making your, I mean, you have to indent it properly, but it will take care of making sure it's PEP compliant, that the code looks really nice, okay? Right, so indentation is important. You have to understand certain like reserved words, like the word open, you can only use it for a particular purpose, right? You cannot use it as a variable name for something else. The same thing with the word def or the word import, right? And in your editor, like on mine, those words have like, you know, nice little colored names here that identify it as words that, you know, have a purpose. Okay, so I mean, does that help, Brooke? Am I answering close to what you need?
Yeah, that definitely answers.
All right, so at the beginning of the course, we discussed how this imports, right? This code that we're importing lives within the Python distribution, right, that you have. SQLite 3, JSON, and CSV, but we can do our own, okay? And that's what we did here in this function or this script here. This script, what I'm doing is I'm defining a function, giving it a name, and I tell there'll be a parameter, and this parameter, right, is gonna be called full path. Okay, so, you know, a variable name called full path. It's called another parameter argument, an argument. Okay, and this that what's here is gonna be referenced, you know, throughout this block, right? This block is my first function. Okay, so that makes sense. And at the end, I'm gonna return something out. All right.
So further, I don't want to interrupt like the rolling on, but it's like further down, where it says like it's just after select with from. I think it's from is Why is the kicks contact table not indent? Like this might be a minor question, but why?
No, but it's a good question.
Yeah, so, that's what I was like particularly curious. Like I understood, like
So when you use the triple quotes within a function like this, it allows you to ignore the rules, the indentation rules in that sense.
That's right.
Like if I do this, it's still gonna run.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, that was just an org. Okay.
Yeah. And I like to do that. I mean, again, this is not PEP compliant. Actually, this looks pretty ugly. But to me, it makes sense. Like to me, putting my select here, actually I should have, instead of having it here, I should have been here. To me, makes more sense. So I got what I'm pulling from the database and from where kind of like separate, you know?
Okay. That's okay. It was I guess, okay. I understood where
and just to jump in real quick about code formatting, there are tools out there to help with code formatting to tell you whether it's wrong or it's not PIP compliant. There's ways out there to do it. It's kind of outside the scope, but there's ways to do it.
Yeah, we talked about black last class. I don't know if you were last class. So black helps with some of that.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's a good question, and I didn't address that. But so good observation. Yeah, it's because of the triple quotes within the function does that. Now, if I do the triple quotes outside of the function, right, what's gonna happen? Well, it's a bad example because it's another triple quote. Let's do it from here. Let's do it from here, for example. If I triple quote this, everything turns green, right? All this stuff is ignored. It's not gonna be executed by the interpreter. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So we don't want to do that. This is that's to kind of ignore a whole block. But if you want to ignore just one line, you use the hashtag, or as we old folks call it, a pound sign.
Pound sign.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, I'm old. So you know, and ignores that line. Okay. All right, and I get an example here. Well, I'll discuss it in a second. When we get here, I'll tell you why I did this. All right, so. I was getting to the point that we define our function and we're going to do stuff with our function. I'm not going to discuss what we're doing with our function yet. And then whatever the function does, we return it. Now, the point I'm making, it links with imports, right? If you look at the way I did it, the other script, like quote unquote my main script, the cake Discord parser, I'll use a simple one. There we go. So what I'm doing is from parser functions, right? Which is this script that I have my functions in. I want to import everything. You all notice that? So pretty much in this case, I'm importing functionality from Python itself that's included with it. But I can do my own. I can have my own functions in this script. And in this case, I'm importing the asterisk means all. I'm importing all of them. I'm importing JSON parser. I'm importing SQLite parser. I'm importing print to file parser. That means that this line here, when I'm saying JSON parser and full path, I'm providing some data to that function, it will be able to find it because it was imported, okay? It'll do its magic, and the return, whatever is returned, is gonna be assigned or placed into this variable here on the left. Does that make sense, Brooke?
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's why I was kind of linking it. Like, yeah, we think about importing like magic. Well, there's something in Python I can import and use. Well, this is how it works. Like, you can do your own function and just import it, and your script it will be able to use it, okay?
Okay.
Right. Now, coding patterns, which I mentioned a second ago. What I'm showing you specifically in these functions is a coding pattern that I think is, for my purposes, best for parsing artifacts, because this class, the emphasis is on parsing artifacts from your extractions, okay? And if you didn't know this, what I'm showing you is literally how I came up with ileap and aleap. So if you look at the code in aleap and ileap is this. And this coding pattern is, I think, is pretty interesting because, first of all, what you're doing is you're defining a list, right? And a list, as we talked about that being a sequential, for lack of a better word, a group or list of related items, okay? So you make an empty list, and then you open a file, okay? In this case, this is a JSON file. I describe how we can load it to turn it into a dictionary. And that's called what? What's the technical term for that, Brooke, if you remember? And if you don't, that's okay. I'm putting you on the spot.
Does anybody else remember?
Deserialization, okay?
Okay.
All right, so you serialize, you turn it from a dictionary into JSON, and JSON to a dictionary, deserialization. You deserialize it. And again, I'm throwing these words at you because these words, as you're going through people's research, you'll be like, well, I deserialized it. All right, so I'm changing it from one type of file to a thing that could be understood, by Python or whatever it is, right? Deserialization. Or when the data is moved from the cloud to your phone, it's serialized and deserialized, and vice versa, okay? And you will find JSON inside SQLite databases, which is what we'll do soon. All right. So I take that data, and in this case, I reversed it because it's a chat. So I want to read the chats from the earliest down, so it makes sense to me. And then I go and pull out from these dictionaries, right? The key. I'm sorry, from the not from the list. Sorry. I pulled these different things, right? These different values, okay? Keys, and I get the values. And I can go into this if people want, but for now, I'm not going to, because the coding pattern that I want to teach you is this one here. When you do the appends, I taught you how to do appends. And the way I taught you to do appends was like this. I'm gonna delete this. Whatever's in the parentheses and, item, right? Whatever you and it adds that as a new thing, okay? This new coding pattern, what I'm doing is I am using extra parentheses there. So inside here, I can put, I can put its own little list. Oops. What can I type? All right. So since numbers, I don't need quotes. Right? They're ints. Does this make sense? So this little list here, or sequence of numbers, 1, 2, 3, they will all be placed inside, appended to a index location in my list. Does that make sense, Brooke?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And I think I discussed in class. I'm gonna. There's people that weren't here last class. So let me do this real quickly. Let me just print out. Not here. I need to print it out here. Let me print out. Oh, I already have it here. Okay, I can do that. All right, so let me see where I can find it. I think it's at the top. No, I did not do that. Just bear with me for a second, folks. I'm putting to the file. I'm putting the, yeah, no, results. I'm just putting the first one, right? So actually I want the whole thing. There we go. Did I pass it? There we go. All right, so here so the function does its magic. It returns the list that we're appending, creating, and look, we know it's a list because you have the bracket, and then you see here the first up to here. The first like index location 0 has all that. The highlighted part. It has a timestamp, comma, username, comma, message, comma, and whatever this number was, which I don't remember. I think it's the ID of the chat ID, okay? Notice how I put a list of items inside the first index location of my list in a sense, right? And the point I'm showing you this is that I'm giving you now another coding pattern where if you're going through collections of things, you can put them all together using the parentheses in your list. And then the next collection of things could be the next entry in your list, and all be placed together and so forth. The third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, right? And this is super useful for forensics. I mean, for digital forensics, because what our stakeholders want, it's data that's related within itself at discrete points in time. That's pretty much what you're doing. It could be chats, it could be you know, geolocation activity, but it's at a particular point in time, these items are related. And this is one way behind the scenes that you can do it. Does that help, Brooke, more or less?
Oh yeah. All that helps.
Now, in this particular, so I got this one particularly, it just pulls the JSON. This one, this other function, you know, makes a connection to the database, sets a cursor so we can send commands to that database. The first command is an execute, right? So we want to do a select. And again, coding patterns. I'm gonna get all the results in line 38. I like to check if there's data in it, right? Because you can have a query that's empty, right? So if it's empty and you try to pull something from it, you're gonna get errors, right? So I check, all right, is all rows empty? And you would do it with len. Len is length, right? How many items are in this list? Is it 0, right? If the entries are more than 0, I'll do stop. But if it's not more than 0, which means it's 0 or less, then I'm going to say, look, no data available for whatever it is, right? And in this case, I'm returning an empty list. But here, if there's data there, then I'm going to go and do a iterate. And this is something that we discuss a lot. And this is something I cannot explain here. But there's a video on iteration. How do we iterate through lists and iterate through dictionaries and iterate to even to a string, right? We iterate through the results and we pull out the data that we need. And we also discuss what the S strings are. So I pulled that out, okay? Actually, let me make a comment on that. Yes, Jesse is correct. I will discuss that in a second. All right, so notice here what I'm doing here. Notice that I do my query, I fetch my results, and I put those results in the variable called all rows, okay? And then I'm iterating through all rows. And the variable that we're receiving the iteration, right, the data from each entry is called row, okay? And if you think about this, this row is gonna be as long as the items I am selecting from the database, right? So it'll be row, I'm gonna look at here, you highlight line 29, row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, okay? So I can go and say, okay, in row, the entry 0 will correspond to the GID, row 1, display name. If I were to put row 6, it's gonna crap out because it'll tell me I'm outside of the index. Because this when I fetch the items, there is no 6, right? It goes from 0 to 5. There is no row 0. So that's why this is where it comes from. I hope I didn't explain that previously because of this. this variable receives each row of the results, which again is a tuple, as Jesse was saying. So I want to look at those locations. Row 0, row 1, row 2. And if you have more, if you're pulling more stuff from your database, then it'll be row 6 and row 7 and whatever it is, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I had a question offline about SQLite, and I answered it, and that's fine. But if you're not familiar on how to pull data from a SQLite or SQL database, you have to Google that. I mean, there is a way of like select means a thing and from means something, and you put commas, but don't put a comma at your last field that you want to pull. Like some rules on how to do that, and that's out of scope of the class because this is not a SQL a structured query language class, but. You can Google that and get smart on that. Or we can do another class for that in the future if people want it. Okay. And then, that's how I pull it from rows, from my results, and then I put them all here. This coding pattern should work for pretty much any, not shouldn't. It will work for any SQLite database. What will change is how complex your query is and how many items are you pulling, which will dictate how many items you're going to append to your list. Okay. And in this case here, I am printing at this point the stuff to the screen. Some other folks might want to print it out from the list. I mean, to the screen, or maybe not even print it to the screen. Just send it to a report. I mean, it depends on you, which is another point I want to make. There is not just one way of coding or doing a thing. There's many ways. And when I started doing some of this coding, it got the job done, but it was really horrible. I've been lucky to have Yogesh and Agam and a few other folks really refine some of my coding, me learning their coding patterns, me try to understand how they do things, which is what I want everybody to do as you see me, and then grow from there. Okay. Last thing for this script, I made a general purpose function. And what does a general purpose function mean? It's a function that you can use, and it's open enough that different functions or different processes can use it, which leads to code reuse, right? That means that when I print to the file, I can send the output of this SQLite parser function, or I could be sending to it the output of this JSON parser function, and this printing function, print to a file, like actually make a file, will work. We'll just take that input and make a file as you expected. So it's multiple functions. Instead of me having to take this code and paste it inside this function, and that same code paste it inside this function to make sure that the data goes to a file. No, I just have a file that will handle all creation of data files for this run. This one is specifically is creating a tab delimited text file from the data that we're pulling from the JSON and the SQLite. Does that make sense, Brooke?
That does. Can we talk? I'm curious. I don't know if you. I don't think you've touched on this yet, but what Jesse was saying about just know that from a while ago about a list versus a tuple, and one can be modified. I'm just trying to remember in the recesses of my brain. I remember learning that, but why is it again that a tuple cannot be updated or modified? I know this, but
I think that's just the way they said it. That's just what they call it when they do it that way. I mean, there's just two types of lists. They're both lists of items, but one is modified, one isn't. That's the only difference. They basically can do the same thing.
Well,
if you put something in a tuple, though, you can't go in there and take something and change like the encoding or subtract or add or anything like that.
Yeah.
In the case of what Alex is doing right now, it makes more sense to use the tuples. So in here, because you don't want to modify the data as you pull it out of it directly from the source. You want to move it and then modify it so you have the original.
Do you all remember the difference between using the copy functionality versus just assigning, right? When you're saying like, let me open a new one. I'm not gonna be running code, but just for this discussion.
You're saying taking over the whole thing. If anyone else has questions, please.
Say what?
If anyone else has questions, please chime in.
No. But these are good questions, right? When you're saying A equals B, if you change B, you change A, you're also changing B, right? Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you used to use the copy command thing to be able to copy and be independent. So same thing with here. Like if you're just pulling stuff from a list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what you're pulling is an assignment, right? And you change that assignment, the list could be changed. And
Yeah.
Python doesn't want you to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we're discussing that in a dictionary, you can use a tuple as a key, but you cannot use a list as a key. Remember that from class, more or less?
Yes.
Yeah, it is because of that, right? If you put a list there as your key, you can change the list somewhere else, and then your key will change. And that Python doesn't like that because by definition, the dictionary keys the keys in a dictionary have to be, unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can change it, there'll be a possibility that it's not unique anymore, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Python enforces when it pulls stuff out from lists from other lists, it will force it to be a tuple. Remember, Python handles the type for you. You don't have to define the type in Python.
That's, yep. Yeah, I remember.
I don't have to tell it, this is an int. This is
Yeah.
a string. The Python knows. So Python enforces pulling stuff from a list as a tuple.
Mm-hmm.
So it forces that integrity. And I know I'm going really down in the weeds, but does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I'll put a 1 in here. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, for the regular user, I nerded out a little bit, but for the regular user, it's look, you get a tuple out of a list from a list, and that's okay, right? You work with that and treat it as a list. Don't worry about it. Just treat it as a list, pull it out, and assign it to different things, and use it, and you'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna show you like the example of that. You run a type on the list, and then a type of the output of the list. You will see the difference. You will see the type is list, and the other one's a tuple, but we're not gonna do that. I think the verbal explanation is enough.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So now, again, I mentioned about building houses, right? I gave you a hammer and I gave you a nail, right? And part of the hammer I'm discussing now is, and the nail I'm discussing is the dot notation here, right? When there's these methods next to the dot, or here, like append, right? I got my list, and we hit dot, and then there's a method here called append that will let me add things to that list. In this case, I imported CSV. You see it up here. I imported this command because it allows me to make, comma delimited or tab delimited files, text files. So I imported that, and then they have a method here called writer, right? Which it will write to this file, right? I'm showing you that because instead of me having to worry on how do I take the output of my list and delimiting it, right? Put it tabs in between each item, which I could sit down and code myself. Sure, why not? But I'm not lazy, I'm efficient. So I'm gonna Google, how can I make a tab delimited file in Python really easily? And they will talk to you about CSV module here, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm opening a file as writable. And for the fact of saying open, if it's not there, it will create that handle to be able to generate that file, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that makes sense. And so I hit open. If the file's not there, it will start to create it. There's my handler as file. And then I have this variable called TSV. I call it like that because, tab separated value. And I'm gonna call the function to make my file. I'm gonna tell it, okay, write, right? I want to write the content of my list. I'm sorry. I'm gonna write to my file. Sorry. And as I'm writing, I want to make sure that it's delimited with a tab. And this is the I want to say Unicode, but it's not. It's not Unicode. It's these two characters mean tab when you put them in a file. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're invisible to your editors, but they're there. Okay. And then now I go through my the items in my list, and I'm just writing them down. I'm just writing each row. So how's that look? I'm gonna run the script real quickly. This is a simple one. Let me run it here. And some of this part, it will require. There we go. It will require study on your own, right? So notice you have here your time. There's a tab here, and see the tab here is in my editor. It's a little triangle. You see that? See little triangles in between the fields?
Yeah.
That's why. So you see two triangles here is because we're missing some data there. And you see the dot is a space, right? So that's why I like this editor. When I'm having errors, I can just highlight it and figure out, oh, I put a tab where I should have a space or whatever it is. Okay. And same thing with the other file, with the database file. And again, if folks here are like, look, I'm behind and this is super advanced, don't despair. Next class, if we need to go even simpler, go back more classes, we will do that. We're not going to be introducing new concepts for a little bit to make sure we can catch up.
Yeah, so for me, as someone who I don't have a programming background, and this is the first time that I've really learned, right? Spend time learning a programming language. So for me, I don't know if anyone else who's taking this class is in the same boat, but for me, it's sort of it's just brand new. This way to structure things, organize my thoughts is brand new. So this kind of review helps me out. Because now it's just sort of helps me have things come together. So I'm sorry if my questions are it might be simple for some people, but this helps me as a brand spanking new person. If anyone has more complex questions too, please ask.
Well, I mean, if you ask me, I think your questions are pretty complex, to be honest, because we just discussed internally why Python gives you tuples and not something else, right?
Yeah.
So no, they're pretty good questions. Now, this is the second coding pattern that I wanted to really highlight with this exercise, right? I gave you the coding pattern of, look, you import what you need to work with at the top, that's your roof, right? Mm-hmm. And for JSON and SQLite, you're gonna open your file, deserialize it as a JSON, or do your query if it's SQLite or SQL. And then you're gonna pull the data you need, and then you're gonna put it in a list. And that list, you can send it off to be printed, or you can send it off to be sent to the screen, and you're done. Now, that's the main pattern. Now, the second coding pattern that I want to teach you is this part. Notice this line 5 here. Here, I'm calling the function and assigning the returns to a variable. Notice that if I do this, actually, let's do it. Why not? If I copy this line, right, and I go to parser function, and I put it right here at the end, okay? What do you think is going to happen? Let's run it. Let's see what happens.
It's going to be an error.
I don't know. We'll see. All right. It gives me an error because why? This data is not there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it that. This is which one? JSON. So let's give it this. Let's give it this. Okay. So now it knows where to get the stuff, and then it's going to call the function. So what's going to happen? You notice that? It worked. You see that?
Yeah.
So why am I teaching you this? You can have your script and define your functions and call those functions within the same script. I mean, that's no problem. As long as the functions are defined before you call them. Does that make sense?
Can you go back up to where that one was defined?
Yeah, so the functions are defined here on the defs.
Right here, yeah, right.
Yeah, on the defs, right? So when I call it, when I say, give me JSON parser, this JSON parser and that function has to be up here, which it is, right?
There, yeah.
It's up here. If I take this function and put it after, it's not gonna work because it'll tell me that I don't know, I can't find it. You know what I mean? And which again, that's an example of what I explained, that Python likes to read from top to bottom, left to right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you can use them, and I do this all the time. I mean, I define my functions and use them within the script. There's no problem. But the second pattern I want to teach you is, look, one way of dealing with parsing functions, if you're doing, parsing artifacts, if you're doing a lot of them, you might want to separate the code that does the parsing, their functions separately from where you call them, right? Because it's easier for you to keep track of things, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Instead of having all this.
Can you say one more time so I can type it? I'm sorry.
Well, before you type, again, this is a coding pattern that I'm teaching you. It's not the ultimate coding pattern. It's not the solution. It's not right. And it's also not wrong, right? It depends on what you need to do. And before you type, listen to this part. I have situations where like this script, I define my functions and I use them within it. And then that output goes out to another function, right? So these functions might only live and be useful for me within a script.
Got it.
Whereas in these ones in particular, they're useful to this other script that's actually calling them and receiving the output and then doing things with that output, right?
Yeah.
So and again, we're doing, you know, again, hammer and nail, and then we put up two pieces of wood together, and then you put another piece of wood and another one, and you end up with a house, right? Same thing. You can use your functions within the script itself, or you can call them from another script. And to call them from another script, you need to what? The keyword is what here? I want to hear you say it.
Import.
Import, yeah. You have to import your functions to the script that you're going to be working from. Okay. All right. So, and I hadn't explained this part, but I think it's useful for everybody to know. If you define your functions, you can use them, right? If you build them, they will come. I'm going to take this out now. In this particular case, this coding pattern, I'm actually separating my functions from where I call them to be used. And the way you call a function to be used is literally have the name of the function. If there's an argument, call that, you know, give that argument that's expecting, and it will execute that code. As simple as that, just by writing that, right? If I write this function will still work. I won't have any way of receiving the return values, but it will still work. That's all you need to call a function. Just type that in. Type the name of the function, and if it has an argument, give it to it. Functions could be without arguments, right? Oops, sorry. And I think I discussed that in class. I'm not going to say it quickly. You can have a function just like this with no arguments, right?
Yeah.
That assumes that the function itself, well, won't be receiving anything to work with, you know. So in this case, I'm teaching you to use functions to have arguments, and I made the point with the print to file function to show you, and again, this is from last class, how a function can have more than one argument. You have one argument, comma, and the second argument, comma. You can put 3, 4, 5, whatever you need, how many you need to provide to your function to do things with it, okay? So, all right. So in this coding pattern, I am saying, okay, my file that I need to work with is here. It's gonna be, this is the path. And then, and again, I'm using relative pathing, right? Notice the dot here. And I discussed this online with some other students. The dot means this directory where my script is. In this directory where my script is, you're gonna go to the input folder and look for this file. Okay, does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah. If you wanna go a level up, then you put another dot. Why am I making the point of teaching you relative pathing? Because when you do scripts, you can't assume where the person will put your code to execute it. You can't assume that it will be in a Windows machine. You can't assume it will be a Mac machine. I mean, you try to make it as general as possible. So all I do is use relative pathing from where my scripts are. So it works. And we can talk that a little more in the future when we're a little more advanced. Okay. So I define where my stuff is. I define where it's gonna be out. And notice here that the output, since I know I want a text file, from the get-go, I said, look, make sure you call it, you know, have a TXT extension, right? Okay. And then, you know, I use the full path for my JSON. It goes, and then I take that as results, and I go to the path out, which is the JSON.txt file, and I write him out there. Okay. And that's it. And then they do the same with the kick. Can this code be optimized? Sure, it can. Notice here how I am doing these two assignments, you know, again, separately. What could be just I mean, I'm hesitant to ask it, but I'll do it anyways. So verbally, not even with code, how can we make this more general use? How can we reduce this code, right? Using what we know, instead of having to say full path this, full path that, and then for the next artifact, full path this, full path that, and so forth, so forth. How can we reduce that? How can we make that more generalized?
I'm gonna let somebody unmute themselves and answer and chime in.
As people think, as a clue, let me see if we can use some code from our functions as a clue. Where's the print one? All right, how can we generalize that? Right. So this is the coding part that's hard, that I cannot. I mean, I'm gonna teach it to you, but it requires you to code and yourself practice and do exercises, right? Like we're doing here. I generalize this printing file because I'm feeding it a list of my results, right? If I were to here put a list, and then I'm not coding to be executed, but like a list of my paths, right? I could then iterate through that list, right? To the list, and then call the functions as needed.
Does it matter that you misspelled?
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I'll write. So,
That's fine.
and I did this on purpose, not the misspellings, but I did on purpose using the comments here, because sometimes when I have stuff that's not completed or I need to follow up on, I will leave a comment in my code and then fix it. By the way, try not to leave comments in your code when you're done, because it can make for hilarious things later. And actually, when I've done, well, no, I'm not gonna say that. Erase that.
After the recording.
Yeah. No, you can get the intention of people when they're coding from their comments if they leave them behind, and this is useful in all sorts of cases. Let me put it that way. Okay. So like I did here, like here in this code here, I said, you know what? I am giving the output, like the chats and everything, but display name, username, I'm not passing that to my functions, right? And I said to myself, you know what? I need to make a list of my headers and pass that as an argument to the print function, because I'm not doing that, right? When I print my stuff, there's no header here. I mean, I know what this is, but it doesn't say timestamp on the top. You know what I mean? Like, so I know I need to make this better. So I make a little comment saying, okay, I'm gonna go and make a list of the headers, and then I'm gonna pass them to the print function so it could add it to the file. Okay. So same thing here. One way, I'm gonna do some pseudocode, because the way I'm gonna run it, I'm gonna type it, it's not gonna run, but I could say, okay, path lists.
We have 2 responses so far, but someone says use arguments and somebody else said pretty tables.
Yeah, pretty table is a cheat way, because pretty tables are great, right? But it depends how you want. It depends how you make it look. It's more of a aesthetic thing, right? So I'm not gonna deduct any points. So let's say I have actually, let's not do it this way. This, if let's do it this way instead. Right. So you put path 1. I'm not gonna actually. So it actually makes more sense. Let me just actually copy it. Right. So this, and then I have my other paths. Where's the other one? And I'm sorry, buddy, for this, but I'm trying to take you to the next level in the sense of think as you're coding. How can I make this better? How can I make it more efficient, right? This list has, and it could be an infinite number of paths, like 10, 15, 20 paths in there, right? Then I could go just like for paths in path list, right? So what am I doing here? Now I'm pulling, full path equals path, or whatever it is, okay? So what happened here? And, now I can just straight up do this, just call all my functions. Call this function and call this function. Does that make sense? So I have a list of my paths, and as I'm going through my paths, I'm gonna call my functions for that path. So instead of having to do this code every single time, and every single time, I just put in a list, I iterate to that list, and I call my functions as needed. This, if I kind of hammer it more, will produce the same output as this code, but it's less code. Does that make sense, bro?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm taking, again, now we're building more the actual house, right? You know what the list is. You know how to do assignments. You know how to iterate. Now we have to think about how can we put them together, right? And this is it's more efficient, right? If I make a function out of this, the only thing I have to provide to the, to the thing to run is the list of paths. Hey, here's where the stuff is. go look at it and do my functions. And I sit back and enjoy my coffee that, as it goes through it. All right. Yeah. So I think this is pretty useful. This is the kind of like calling it, every single time you need it. This is a little bit more automated, more streamlined, faster, and you're using what you know.
Silly question, but so that space in between full path and results list, does that matter?
No, not really.
Just an aesthetic thing. Okay,
yeah.
sorry. Me being nitpicky. I'm just trying to.
No, and you'll see in this codes, I made the spaces just to kind of visually to help you attract your eye to different things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So like here, like honestly, I don't need the space. Oops. I don't need this. Yeah, I don't need this space. I don't need this space. But see, this is like the print function. Actually, I should have done this. So now you can see the pattern. Like you call the path, call the output, run the function, print it to file. Blah blah blah, print it to file.
Yeah. I mean, it's coming. It's definitely coming together for me. This has been immensely helpful for me.
And even if you're not gonna do this type of coding, but at least understanding this coding pattern, when you go and see other person's code, it will make sense to you. You'll be like, okay, I'm following. At least I'm understanding what this person is doing. When you see stuff like that, because you're being exposed by just even if you don't code anything else in the future, just by being here with us, you're getting that exposure that will help you understand other people's code, and it will translate to other languages. Let me give you an example of that, and this is from Heather's class, right? You go and decompile, an APK or I forgot what the name for the iOS one is. Okay. And you're looking at what the compiler understands the code is. Well, you can go through it, and if you understand how this works, you can kind of follow. Okay, this function, what it's doing is looking for the Wi-Fi or looking for the permissions or doing different things. You're not an Android developer, but if you know a little bit of this, you can figure out what that application might be doing, or where that application is keeping an IP that might be relevant to your case, or a list of the Wi-Fi profiles that it's been connected to. I don't know. But just by going through it, you can understand that, right? This is not limited just for you having to code, okay? And if you're doing cases that are in malware cases, and you're decompiling stuff and you want to mobile, this knowledge will help. Even if it's not Python, it will still help. And I'm picking on you, Brooke, because you're the one, doing a bunch of questions, which I appreciate, as we planned. But the feedback is important. Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah. No, this has been immensely helpful for me.
And the other folks that haven't gotten to this exercise yet, as you go through the previous ones, think of what coding pattern am I trying to teach you, right? What use of the hammers and nails am I trying to impress upon you? Okay. And if you feel that you have to Google something that goes beyond what I taught you, go back and read some of that, or just come back to the Discord and ask. And Jesse and some other good folks that are really knowledgeable, more than me, we'll try to help you out. All right. So the last thing I wanted to, at least on this topic, to cover is. Let me show you this. What I'm thinking of doing is stay in the, I opened the wrong one. Stay in this code for a little bit, for the next maybe couple of classes. Because I give an introduction of this. I want to show you how to do arguments for the actual script. I want to show you, a whole bunch of different things. How to use main, what does this main mean, right? So this code does the same thing as the other code, but this one is a little bit, again, more general use. And it has some error checking, right? If I didn't select an output folder, or maybe I didn't select the input folder, right? And then, I'm using a list to go through a folder that has data that I care about. I'm identifying that the data that ends in JSON, identifying the data that ends in kickdatabase.db, right? So we can make it more general, more multi-use. So I want to, next class, if there's not any other questions, stay in this code and build on it, make it a little bit better, more general use. And if anybody has questions from the beginning, look, I want to discuss list again because it doesn't make sense to me. Or I want to discuss dictionary because dictionary has a lot of stuff. Please let Brooke know if you're shy and don't want to tell me. Let Brooke know, and now discuss it again. I mean, there's no problem with that.
So for next class, I mean, I like that we're really focusing and like picking this apart at the same time. I just want to make sure, like, see what everybody's like speed is sort of like, and where people are at. Do you think that do you anticipate giving homework, or like maybe if you don't know now, like posting homework later on? What about the idea of going to a new book? Do you want to discuss that more with you and I, or with the group? I know there's a few questions wrapped into one, but
Yeah.
throw those things out there while the recording is on in case people are like listening, later today or something.
Yeah, I mean, what I would push is nobody says anything. What I would push is, since people bought this book, continue with the book, because we'll get stuff from it. But
Okay.
then I'll keep adding, at the back end of the class, like straight forensics centric stuff. Because what I'm teaching you here right now, I think hopefully everybody knows it, is that, look, we're actually looking for artifacts. We're actually opening them and pulling stuff out. You know what I mean?
Okay. So continue with the book. Are you going to assign like readings from the book? If you haven't decided now, that's like obviously totally cool. I just didn't know if people should keep an eye on. Or
not for next week. Next week I want to keep on this code.
Okay.
And hopefully answer more questions. And then not this week, the next week, then we'll continue on the book, and I'll give some pages.
So not this upcoming Tuesday, the following Tuesday.
The following Tuesday. So by next Thursday, I will have the pages for the other one. And it's about doing like a web app and stuff like that, which, okay, that's fine. But I will give you some forensic stuff. So I do like maybe 15 minutes of the book, and then 10, 15 minutes of forensic stuff, and that's how we'll do it.
Okay.
If anybody doesn't have any other ideas, of course.
Oh, I appreciate the extra time to review what we've learned. Okay, good. I do too. Somebody wrote that, and somebody said also they like the idea. Okay, great. So, and yeah, even if people are not listening to this not live or watching this not live, if you just want to email us after class, like, of course, your opinion matters too. So, yeah.
If you go to my Twitter, at this point you're in this class, you know what my Twitter is, but you can go to my Twitter and DM me, or 4N6. No, I can't type today. Okay, there we go. So,
and the syllabus will be posted, I think, to your blog. I could do that, Briggs. And then maybe for homework assignments, figure out how the best way of posting those from now on too. There's no homework, I guess, for next week though, so we don't have to worry about that right now.
I think what we're gonna do is that we're gonna put it on Discord and on my blog. So like the syllabus thing you're gonna post, I guess we'll keep adding to that post. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Any other questions? If this was helpful, give me a 1. If it's not, give me a 0, and then tell me how to do it better. There's no shame on that. I would actually appreciate that. Tell me that I suck.
Oh, somebody wrote back to me privately, 1 awesome job. I think that was meant for everyone.
Okay, well.
It's definitely not meant for me.
Yeah. All right.
Great job, Briggs. Thank you.
Okay. All righty, well, I'm going to stop the recording, and that's all for today.